Hi, very good morning. I'm Dr. Janak Patel, MD, General Physician. All these lectures are for educative purpose only. Today we are going to discuss on a very interesting topic, that is diuretics. We know that diuretic increases the urine output, and most commonly it is utilized for any particular person who has got edema. So to make it little clarification regarding this, I am going to discuss on diuretics. For understanding where to use, which diuretic to use, whether to use or not to use, etc., we should know how the diuretic works, what they do, when do I use them, and how do I use them. We should answer all those questions. We'll be discussing under all these different headings, that is definition, mechanism of action, classification, indications, contraindications, different types of diuretics and newer diuretics. We know that diuretics by definition, so diuretics are the drug which increases the urine formation. They are also called water pills. Technically, diuretic is the agent which increases the urine volume. They either increase the sodium excretion, and along with that the water excretion is increased. Those are called natriuretics, and which increases more of water, they are called aquauretics. Increases the excretion of solute free water, they are called aquauretics. Why I have selected this topic? Because some of the people uses diuretic for weight loss, and also any person who has got edema, irrespective of the what is the cause of edema, diuretic is utilized to reduce that swelling. So abused diuretic can lead to dehydration and electrolyte imbalance. And one of the notorious electrolyte imbalance which can be dangerous for the human being or for that particular person is potassium imbalance and sodium imbalance. Potassium imbalance will create problems with myocardial tissue and skeletal muscles, while sodium will produce disturbances in CNS functions. We can classify into soluretic or solidiuretic, loop diuretics, potassium sparing diuretics, carbonic anhydrase inhibitor, osmotic diuretics, and phytodiuretics, which are usually now not utilized commonly. They are very commonly utilized in Ayurvedic or homeopathy practice. Among thiazide diuretic, the most common which are being utilized are chlorothiazide, chlorthalidone, hydrochlorothiazide, indapamide, and metalazone. While loop diuretics, mainly two which are most commonly utilized is furosemide and torsemide. Bumetanide and ethacrenic acids are not commonly utilized. Among potassium sparing, spironolactone is the most commonly utilized. Second common which is being utilized is epileron. Amiloride and triamterene are by and large not commonly utilized. Among carbonic anhydrase inhibitor, acetazolamide, and among osmotic, mannitol, urea, and glycerol. These are the three common, but most commonly utilized is mannitol. Now, if we put them into two different groups, one which modifies the salt excretion and one which modifies the water excretion. One which modifies the salt excretion is proximal, which is acting on a proximal convoluted tubule, is carbonic anhydrase inhibitor, which is acting on ascending loop of Henle. It is loop diuretic. which is acting on distal convoluted tubule, those are thiazides, and acting on a collecting system, that is potassium sparing diuretic. Osmotic diuretic, that is mannitol and glycerol, by and large do not create much amount of a salt excretion, but water excretion can be affected by a ADH agonist, which we call desmopressin, and we call veptans. There is another we call lithium and democycline, which has got effect on water excretion. This we are not going to discuss because these are mainly utilized in diabetes insipidus. So we are not going to utilize this particular SIDH and diabetes insipidus. We'll be mainly discussing on this, what we call carbonic anhydrase, loop diuretic, thiazide, potassium sparing, and osmotic diuretics. You can divide upon depending upon the potency, that is a highly potent, medium potent, and weak diuretics. Among weak diuretics, carbonic anhydrase inhibitor we call acetazolamide. Osmotic diuretics, which belongs to weak group, and potassium sparing diuretics. We have already mentioned all the compounds in that. While medium efficacy, we have got thiazide and benzothiazide groups. Among thiazide group, clothalidone, metazolone, metalazone. These are the two common most utilized. Another is indapamide. Among benzothiazide, hydrochlorothiazide is most commonly utilized, while highly potent, it is furosemide and torsemide. Bumetanide is not commonly being utilized. So you can divide into highly effective, medium effective, and low effect, that is potassium sparing diuretics, osmotic diuretics, and carbonic anhydrase inhibitor. They belong to that group. Weak diuretics are called class 1, medium are called class 2, and highly potent we call class 3. Now if you go through this particular slide, you can see that a blood which comes via the afferent artery into the glomerulus, 80% is filtered. Sorry, 20% of the volume is filtered. 80% is returned back to the efferent arterioles, which goes back into circulation. Out of the 20% which is filtered, 19% is reabsorbed. Indirectly, 99% of the plasma volume is returned back to the systemic circulation, and only 1% of volume is thrown out in the form of urine formation. If you see in that, the sodium is filtered. Out of that filtered sodium, 65 to 70% is reabsorbed in proximal tubule, 25% is reabsorbed in ascending loop, and 5% in distal convoluted tubule, and less than 5% in collecting tubules. Indirectly, 99% of the sodium is reabsorbed, and less than 1% is excreted out in urine. So this is a very simple thing which shows you that almost out of 20% of water what is being filtered, 19% is reabsorbed. So 1% of the water is excreted out, and less than 1% of sodium is excreted out in urine. This is what is happening in a normal person. And by giving different varieties or different types of diuretic, you create either increased excretion of sodium along with increased excretion of water, or you create increased water excretion. Then we call as aqua diuretics. And when you increase the sodium excretion, it is called natriuretics. So these are the two common mechanism of action. Along with this, you lose little amount of potassium and also other electrolytes. So we'll just go through this diagram. that is first group of diuretics which acts at the level of what we call is a proximal convoluted tubule. It is acetazolamide, we call carbonic anhydrase inhibitor, that inhibits the reabsorption of bicarbonate in proximal convoluted tubule, and it is class 1 variety of a diuretic, we call it a weak diuretic. And here this particular diuretic can give rise to what we call as acid base imbalance, because bicarbonate is inhibited, it inhibits the reabsorption of bicarbonate. So bicarbonates are thrown out. So as bicarbonate is thrown out, you lose bicarbonate in urine and H ion is retained, which will lead to acidosis. So you should keep this thing in mind. Another compound which is acting at the level of proximal convoluted tubule, that is mannitol. Mannitol will be acting on a proximal tubule, descending loop of Henle, as well as on a collecting tubules. It is acting at the 3 level, and it will produce diuretic by means of osmosis. So mannitol can be utilized only in presence of a good working kidney. In presence of CKD, you cannot utilize mannitol. So that should be kept in mind. The another group of diuretic which is acting on a descending loop of Henle is what we call as potent diuretic, that is furosemide, torsemide, which is acting at the level of ascending loop of Henle, and where it inhibits sodium potassium chloride transport, pore transport, and by which it will result in retention of sodium, retention of chloride, and water is excreted out in the form of increased urine output. And in this particular group, you lose sodium because it is blocking the sodium, potassium and chloride pore transport in ascending loop of Henle, and because of that the person will start losing sodium in urine, and person can develop electrolyte imbalance, and this is the most potent diuretics we call furosemide and torsemide. Thiazide diuretic acting on a distal convoluted tubule. This inhibits reabsorption of sodium and chloride in distal convoluted tubule and resulting in retention of water in tubules. Hence, urine output is increased, sodium is lost and chloride is also lost. But this belongs to what we call as a weak diuretics. These are not potent diuretics. So they can result into sodium imbalance, that is hyponatremia and hypochloremia. The another group of diuretics which is we call as thiazide groups, which also includes chlorthalidone, metalazone and indapamide groups. They also act at the level of distal convoluted tubule. We have got another group which we call as a potassium sparing diuretics. This potassium sparing diuretics most commonly utilized is spironolactone. Another two, that is amiloride and triamterene, are not commonly utilized. These are aldosterone antagonists. Spironolactone is aldosterone antagonist which inhibits aldosterone mediated reabsorption of sodium and secretion of potassium. Hence, when this is being utilized, it blocks that action of aldosterone, and by blocking that action, the reabsorption of sodium is decreased. So sodium is thrown out, and along with sodium, potassium is retained, can result into hyperkalemia. So this is one danger. So you have to keep it in mind. These are potassium sparing diuretics. So potassium can be retained and can end up with hyperkalemia. So by and large, to reduce that side effects, spironolactone is very frequently combined with other groups of diuretics, that is either with torsemide or with furosemide. which will end up with potassium excretion because it is acting at sodium, potassium and chloride co-transport. Same what we have mentioned before is mentioned here. This is acetazolamide action. Then osmotic diuretic will act at this level, will also act on descending loops, will also act on a collecting tubules. Loop diuretic will act on a ascending loop. Thiazide diuretic will be acting mainly at the level of the distal convoluted tubule. Aldosterone antagonist will be acting on the collecting tubules. ADH antagonist will be acting at the level of collecting tubules. So you have to know that adenosine is not commonly being utilized. So this loop diuretic will be acting by sodium, potassium and chloride co-transport, while osmotic diuretic will be acting by water reabsorption. This will be by acting at the level of sodium bicarbonate. This will be acting by acting at the sodium and chloride reabsorption, and this will be potassium exchange. So carbonic anhydrase, osmotic diuretics, loop diuretics, thiazide diuretics, potassium sparing diuretics, and what we call as mannitol. Potassium sparing, etc. Now to summarize that thing, carbonic anhydrase inhibitor, commonly we utilize acetazolamide, which is acting on the proximal tubule, which inhibits the carbonic anhydrase enzymes, and by inhibiting that enzymes, it reduces bicarbonate absorption, will result into acidosis. Loop diuretics will be acting at the loop of Henle. It blocks sodium, potassium and chloride same transporter, co-transporter, and it will end up with what we call as alkalosis. While thiazide diuretics, which is acting on a distal convoluted tubule, which is blocking sodium and chloride co-transporters, and it will end up with alkalosis. Osmotic diuretic will usually have no effect. Mannitol, it will mainly be osmotic diuretics. It will be acting on a proximal tubule and also on the loop of Henle. While potassium sparing diuretics will be ending up with acidosis because it is acting at the level of the collecting tubules where potassium is retained and H ions is exchanged for that particular purpose. So it will end up with acidosis. Now we go to what we call as, when you give diuretics, we forget there are some compounds which interferes with effect of diuretics, or there is what we call as drug interaction. So NaCid, excess of salt, certain decongestant and a proben acid will diminish the effect of diuretics. So if you are giving diuretic and simultaneously person is on a NaCid or excess of salt intake, the effect of diuretic will wear off and you will have a sodium retention will result into edema. While when you are using hyperkalemia can end up when you are using potassium sparing diuretic and simultaneously person is on ACE inhibitor, beta blocker or potassium supplement from outside, or person is on heparin. So when potassium sparing diuretics are combined with ACE inhibitor, you must keep it in mind regarding hyperkalemia. Also potassium supplements you should keep it in mind because good number of cup syrups, urinary alkalizer, they are rich in potassiums. So that should be avoided. Certain fruits, particularly banana, Citrus fruits like orange, lemon, then sweet lemon, all those are rich in potassium. Banana and coconut water are highly rich in potassium. That should not be given when the person is on ACE inhibitor or potassium sparing diuretics. Ethacrenic acid is notorious to produce ototoxicity. So when you give a loop diuretics, they belong to ethacrenic groups. When given in large doses, you should keep it in mind they can end up with ototoxicity. In general, three groups: thiazide, loop diuretics and potassium sparing diuretics. Combined together, commonly indication is congestive heart failure, where it is a first line, first choice. Also in an old age group for antihypertensive purpose, it was being utilized as a first drug of choice, particularly thiazide group of diuretics. Now that particular has been changed, and whenever a person is a resistant hypertension and it is because of sodium overload, diuretic becomes a drug of choice. Any person who has got a volume overload, particularly say like congestive heart failure, or say person who has got a volume overload because of say nephrotic syndrome, or in a person with cirrhosis of liver, diuretic will help. But as far as congestive heart failure, it is a first drug of choice, while in another two, it is a supplementary. In case of liver disorder, that is portal hypertension, there is hyperaldosteronism, and because there is a secondary hyperaldosteronism, what we call is a spironolactone becomes the first drug of choice, and it is used for hyperaldosteronism, and partly it has got a diuretic effect. So in a portal hypertension where you get a secondary hyperaldosteronism, spironolactone, or we call aldactone, is a drug of choice. Whenever you use hydrochlorothiazide, the maximum dose is 50 milligram. Higher the dose, the side effects are more. And in a case of hydrochlorothiazide, the common side effects are gout, uric acid is elevated, hyperuricemia, hyperglycemia, and hyperlipidemia. So these three are very common when you use hydrochlorothiazide. When you use potassium sparing diuretic, chances of hyperkalemia is very high, and particularly if it is combined with ACE inhibitor or ARB, or if it is utilized with AKI, CKD, or end stage renal disease, and particularly in an old individual. You should think it over of using potassium sparing diuretic in any person who has got AKI, CKD, or end stage liver disease, as well as a loop diuretics also should be used with caution. Loop diuretics, that is furosemide and torsemide, are notorious to produce electrolyte imbalance, particularly sodium imbalance and potassium imbalance. As far as sodium is concerned, hyponatremia, and as far as potassium is concerned, hypokalemia can be ended up. But in a person with what we call is a potassium sparing diuretic along with ACE inhibitor or ARB, very frequently they can end up with hyperkalemia, and particularly if the person is using potassium in diet, they will end up more commonly with hyperkalemia. When loop diuretics are utilized, the chances of water loss is more. Person can develop hypovolemia, and they can end up with what we call is a orthostatic hypotension. This will be more common with old age groups. All this should be kept in mind in general when you use diuretic as a treatment part of a certain disease, particularly congestive heart failure, cirrhosis of liver, nephrotic syndrome, etc. So this should be kept in mind. So postural hypertension is quite common. So diuretic main use is for hypertension. Very frequently it is combined with ACE inhibitor, ARB, or with CCB. Whenever there is a volume overload, to reduce preload, particularly in case of a pulmonary edema or systemic edema, diuretics are utilized. And also a specific indication is in a glaucoma where you use acetazolamide, or we call carbonic anhydrase inhibitors. Diuretic for the treatment part of electrolyte imbalance should not be utilized as far as possible, because you will have to keep a constant watch on electrolytes if you are utilizing diuretic for electrolyte imbalance. Little dangerous indication. So most common indication is edema, which is because of the volume overload, congestive heart failure. In an oliguric stage of acute renal failure, it is utilized as a challenge test. In primary hypertension, yes, very commonly utilized. Sometimes diuretic is also utilized for poisoning, certain poisoning, which can be excreted out very nicely by kidney. One indication we call hypercalciuria, hypercalcemia. In glaucoma, I already mentioned that you can utilize acetazolamide, we call carbonic anhydrase inhibitor, most commonly preferred drug. And in case of diabetes insipidus, also you can utilize some of the drugs, particularly we call Veptans. So if we come together, the first choice for heart failure, for mild to severe edema, particularly volume overload, again in congestive heart failure, in essential hypertension, or we call primary hypertension, and in case of a pulmonary edema, where again there is a volume overload on a pulmonary circulation. Other additional utilization is in oliguric acute renal failure, hypercalcemia, dilutional hyponatremia, in hypercalciuria, nephrolithiasis, nephrogenic diabetes insipidus, Liddle syndrome, primary hyperaldosteronism, edema of liver disorders, particularly cirrhosis, because this is secondary hyperaldosteronism, and in a case of a lithium-induced diabetes insipidus. These are some of the indications which are selective indications where certain groups of diuretics are being utilized. Certain diuretics are also utilized in certain variety of epilepsy, acute mountain sickness, raised intracranial pressure, glaucoma we have already mentioned. Some diuretics can be preferred in metabolic alkalosis because they produce acidosis. In nephrotic syndrome, they can be utilized as a challenge test in AKI, particularly oliguric acute renal failure. In certain CKD, you can utilize with little caution cystinuria, portal hypertension, ascites, hyperkalemia, hypokalemia, and certain poisoning. Absolute contraindication. You should not use diuretic as a treatment part in electrolyte imbalance, particularly sodium imbalance and potassium imbalance, if other treatments are available. As far as possible, should be avoided. You should not combine ACE inhibitor with potassium sparing diuretic as far as possible. If a person has got hypotension, loop diuretics should not be utilized. And by and large, diuretics should be stopped for that particular period of time till the person is revived. If any person who has got a severe dehydration, diuretic is contraindicated. In hyperuricemia, hydrochlorothiazide should be avoided because it gives rise to further elevation of uric acid level, and also it will result into hypocalcemia. Also, hydrochlorothiazide can end up with hyperglycemia, so person who are on borderline diabetic, pre-diabetic, and even a diabetic person, you should use with caution. In CKD stage 3 and 4, relative contraindication, you have to keep it in mind. And in a AKI, In an oliguric stage, you can try as a challenge test. Should not be utilized for a weight loss purpose. It is not a good mode of treatment in a person who has got edema secondary due to hypoproteinemia, or if a person who has got a lymphedema, or person who has got a mixed edema. In this, it is not the treatment, but very frequently it is being utilized because the person complains of swelling, and you do not make the diagnosis and you start with diuretics. Even in case of a varicose edema, varicose vein, or chronic venous insufficiency, diuretics should not be utilized because it will reduce that, but simultaneously the person will develop hypovolemia and orthostatic hypotension. This should be kept in mind. So in a person with a unilateral edema, which is very frequently because of venous, diuretics should be avoided. Usually we say that for localized edema, which is very frequently because of inflammation like cellulitis or lymphangitis, lymphatic obstructions, venous obstruction like DVT or thrombophlebitis, or because of chronic venous insufficiency, diuretic is not indicated. This should be kept in mind, but this is the most common conditions where a diuretic has been prescribed in and out. As far as generalized edema is concerned, which is secondary due to cardiac, particularly congestive heart failure, it is the drug of choice to reduce volume overload. In hepatic, it is co-prescribed along with, we call as aldosterone antagonist. In renal, it has to be used with caution because it can end up with electrolyte imbalance very frequently. Even in nephrotic syndrome also it should be used with caution. So in a renal condition, it has to be used with caution. In all this condition, mixed edema, vasodilator, say CCB-induced edema, pregnancy-induced edema, capillary leak syndrome, diuretics are not indicated. This should be kept in mind. So very clinically very clear. In cardiac, loop diuretics are a drug of choice. In hepatic, we call aldosterone antagonists are the drug of choice. While in renal, potassium sparing diuretics is contraindicated. You can try with loop diuretics, but with certain precautions. Particularly, it can be utilized as a challenge test in a person with oliguric acute renal failure or AKI. We are starting with now certain groups of diuretic. Group wise will be going on. Carbonic anhydrase inhibitor, the most common indication is for glaucoma, and second indication not very frequently utilized. If a person has got a metabolic alkalosis, to reduce that alkalosis, you can utilize carbonic anhydrase inhibitor. The first use is in a case of glaucoma. Second common is for urinary alkalization. Not commonly utilized, but particularly if the person has got cystinuria or hyperuricemia, it can be utilized to alkalize the urine. Not commonly utilized in metabolic alkalosis. In certain epilepsy, because it produces acidosis, secondary to acidosis, the seizure frequency reduces, so it can be utilized in epilepsy, but not commonly used in everyday practice. It is one of the drug of choice in acute mountain sickness, so carbonic anhydrase inhibitor, we can put an indication in glaucoma, urinary alkalizer, in a metabolic acidosis, alkalosis, epilepsy, acute mountain sickness, and in a case of benign intracranial hypertension. These are some of the indications. The main indication is glaucoma. These are all secondary indications. Cystinuria, we have already explained you, it will make the urine alkaline, so precipitation of cystine will be reduced. Glaucoma, one of the drug of choice, and particularly in ocular surgery, pre-operative also carbonic anhydrase is given. Main side effect is hypokalemia and metabolic acidosis. This should be kept in mind. So whenever a person who is having COPD, in this particular person, the chances of as such carbon dioxide retention producing respiratory acidosis is much higher. You should keep this thing in mind. Because of this acidosis, person can have drowsiness, can develop paresthesia, fatigue, abdominal discomfort, anorexia. There are other side effects like urticaria, melena, hematuria, photosensitivity, and person can also develop what we call the renal stones. There is also known hypersensitivity to acetazolamide, bone marrow depression, and it can interfere with elimination of ammonia. Hence, if a person has got a liver disease, it is contraindicated. So this should be kept in mind. If a person is with cirrhosis or chronic liver disease, acetazolamide should not be utilized. We come to the second group, what we call as a class 3 group, that is furosemide and torsemide or loop diuretics, or we call highly potent diuretics or strong diuretics. This particular are acting at the level of what we call as ascending loop of Henle, where it is acting by blocking sodium potassium chloride symport inhibitors. So sodium absorption will be inhibited, so sodium will be thrown out, potassium will be thrown out, and chloride will be also thrown out, and this will end up with what we call as an electrolyte imbalance, hyponatremia, hypokalemia, hypochloremic condition. So this is regarding these two common diuretics. So side effect will be hypokalemia, hypochloremia, hyponatremia. Along with this, the calcium is also lost. So this can be utilized in a person who is having hypercalcemia. But at the same time, because the calcium is thrown out, the chances of calcium stones increases. There is also a loss of little amount of magnesium, so it can end up with hypomagnesemia. It will end up with hypomagnesemia. So that will end up with what we call as hypokalemia, hypocalcemia, hypomagnesemia, hypochloremia, hyponatremia. Lot of electrolyte imbalance. So you should keep it in mind. Because it is producing little loss of H ions also, it can end up with metabolic alkalosis. There's good amount of volume loss, so person can develop hypovolemia, and secondary to hypovolemia, person can end up with hypotension, postural hypotension. There is ethechronic effects because they belong to ethechronic groups. So there is also ototoxicity. Person can have hearing disturbances, and there is also little amount of hyperuricemia. So all these are the common side effects which should be kept in mind, and these are the two common diuretics which are utilized in a large amount in everyday practice. Again, I am repeating, loop diuretic can produce hypokalemia, hyponatremia, hypocalcemia, hypomagnesemia, all hypochloremia, hypovolemia, but it will lose H ions, so it will end up with alkalosis, metabolic alkalosis, and there will be retention of uric acid, so it can produce hyperuricemia, that is gout. So hyperuricemia is the only hyper, while all other are hypo. You can remember this 5: calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium, chloride, and bicarbonate will be elevated, H ions will be reduced, hence it will produce metabolic alkalosis, and ethechronic effects can produce hearing disturbances. These are the most potent diuretics which are being utilized. So the commonest indication is in severe edema, that is volume overload. In very rarely we utilize as a treatment part of hyponatremia. Most commonly for severe edema, that is we call congestive heart failure, pulmonary edema, and you can utilize in treatment of oliguric acute renal failure. So these two are the common indications. We don't commonly utilize for hyponatremia and even for hypercalcemia. Not a good indication, but once in a while it is being utilized. So this you should keep it in mind. We already mentioned all those indications. Also, they are utilized for barbiturate poisoning or salicylate poisoning because this can be easily excreted by kidney. So main indication is for edema, that is due to congestive heart failure, portal hypertension, nephrotic syndrome, but these two are secondary, not primary indications. In hepatic, the first indication is aldosterone antagonist. Other than non-diuretic action as antihypertensive, calcium stones, idiopathic calcium urolithiasis, in treatment of hypocalcemia, diabetes insipidus, glaucoma, hyponatremia, etc. Not a common indications. We already mentioned all this: hypokalemia, hyperuricemia, hypomagnesemia, hypocalcemia, hypotension, and also you can put hypochloremia, hyponatremia, that is not mentioned here. Nausea, vomiting, diarrhea is quite common, ototoxicity, hypersensitive, and metabolic alkalosis. It can also end up with little amount of hyperglycemia. Now we come to second big group, that is thiazide diuretics or thiazide-like diuretics, which belongs to the medium group, that is class 2 variety. Common we utilize is hydrochlorothiazide and chlorthalidone. Chlorthalidone, these are the two common, and occasionally metolazone. Metolazone is commonly utilized. They are acting by inhibiting sodium and chloride. They do not have effect on potassium. So vasodilatory effects by unknown mechanism, and it is a first drug which we utilize along with other antihypertensive drugs. And commonly in a congestive heart failure we utilize potent diuretic, that is class 3 groups, that is torsemide and furosemide. We don't utilize this thiazide diuretics. So these are the two common diuretics which are very commonly utilized: chlorthalidone, chlorothiazide, and hydrochlorothiazide. By and large, hydrochlorothiazide and chlorthalidone are the two common drugs which are commonly utilized. And you can see here, chlorothiazide is not utilized nowadays, mainly hydrochlorothiazide. We go up to 50, but higher the dose, the chances of hyperuricemia, hyperglycemia, and hyperlipidemia is very common, which is less common with chlorthalidone. Usually in a chlorthalidone, we don't go about 12.5. So again, this particular side effects is being reduced. Metolazone is not commonly utilized. Indapamide is also not commonly utilized. So little amount of vasodilatation is utilized as antihypertensive action. It reduces the calcium excretion. So by reducing the calcium excretion may precipitate hypercalcemia. So this can be utilized in person who are having hypocalcemia, and it is absolute contraindication if the person has got hypercalcemia secondary because of hyperparathyroidism or malignancy, bone malignancy or metastasis. You have to keep it in mind. It increases the magnesium excretion, so it can produce hypomagnesemia. It can produce hypochloremic alkalosis. Hyperuricemia is quite common, and hyperglycemia is also quite common. So higher the dose, longer the use, hyperuricemia, hyperglycemia, are quite common, and in prolonged use you can also end up with hypomagnesemia and hypercalcemia. So hyperuricemia, hyperglycemia, hypercalcemia, and you can end up with increased excretion of magnesium that will produce hypomagnesemia. I've already mentioned hyperlipidemia. So these are the common side effects. They should be kept in mind. It is very frequently utilized as a co-treatment along with other antihypertensive drugs as a combined therapy, or we call dual therapy. In a mild edema, it can be utilized. It is also used in nephrogenic diabetes insipidus. Also in the person who has got increased calcium excretion or calcium stones, it can be utilized because calcium excretion is reduced. So that property can be utilized for treatment of hypocalcemia and also for calcium stones. So thiazide diuretics can be utilized in that particular group. So use is hypertension, edema, maybe mild edema, not commonly for volume overload, hypercalciuria and calcium stones, and in case of nephrogenic diabetes insipidus, it is one of the drug of choice, particularly lithium-induced nephrogenic diabetes insipidus. Metalazone can be utilized if GFR is less than 50. So that is commonly utilized in CKD, and particularly in a person with lithium toxicity. Adverse side effect we already mentioned: hypokalemia may precipitate renal failure, hyperuricemia, hyperglycemia, hyperlipidemia, hypomagnesemia. It can precipitate even hypercalcemia, hypochloremic alkalosis, hypersensitive manifestation, etc. And it is not safe during pregnancy. It can end up with hypomagnesemia, which can end up with torsada pointis. Chlorthalidone has got little advantage because it has got dual action like vasodilatation, plus it reduces blood volume. So it is one of the drug of choice for hypertension, congestive heart failure, diabetes with hypertension, metabolic syndromes, isolated systolic hypertension, elderly individual, cardioprotection, because it reduces congestive heart failure, it reduces LVH, and it is also benefited in ischemic heart disease. Also, it will reduce cerebrovascular disorders, strokes, pleiotropic effects on antiplatelet angiogenesis, and reduces vascular permeability. Hence, there is a benefit in a congestive heart failure. These are all additional advantage of chlorthalidone apart from diuretic effects. We already mentioned the adverse effect like hypercalcemia, hyperuricemia, hyperglycemia, hyperlipidemia, and it can produce hyponatremia as well as hypokalemia. Along with that, it can produce metabolic alkalosis, and there will be loss of magnesium leading to hypomagnesemia, which can end up with torsada pointis. Sometimes it can also end up with impotence. All this should be kept in mind. I'm skipping over this particular slide. There's a difference between loop diuretics and thiazide diuretic. At your leisure time, you can go through. Now we come to potassium sparing diuretic, particularly we call aldosterone antagonists. There are two aldosterone antagonists, spironolactone and eplerenone. And there are two other, which are amiloride and triamterene. These are not commonly being utilized nowadays. This is a very mild one. So they are called mild diuretics or class 1 diuretics, and as they spare potassium, they retain potassium, hence they are called potassium sparing diuretics. They will not cause hypokalemia. They are acting at sodium channel, and because of that the potassium is retained and sodium is being thrown out. So it enhances sodium excretion. So it can be combined with loop diuretics. It will prevent hypokalemia, so it will reduce the side effects of loop diuretics. It blocks sodium channel, and this can be also utilized in Liddle syndrome and lithium-induced diabetes insipidus. But you have to keep it in mind regarding potassium. So triamterene and amiloride are usually not commonly utilized. It decreases the potassium excretion and it increases the sodium loss. Because of this, you can also end up with alkaline urine because it throws out bicarbonate. It reduces calcium and magnesium excretion, and because of this it will result into hypermagnesemia and hypercalcemia. So it is utilized mainly for hypokalemia and increased natriuretic response. So that is the main indications. Side effect wise, because it is retaining potassium, it can end up with hyperkalemia. It is retaining calcium, so it can end up with renal stones, interstitial nephritis, and megaloblastosis. Most common. Aldosterone antagonists, particularly spironolactone and eplerenone, most commonly be utilized is spironolactone, which is we go up to 100 milligram, even in some condition, particularly hyperaldosteronemia, you can go up to even 200 milligram also. Usually, we don't utilize amiloride and triamterene. Main use of this diuretic is in combination with loop diuretics or thiazide diuretics. It is utilized as a treatment for refractory edema, in treatment for hirsutism, which is secondary due to PCOS, where there is a hyperaldosteronism, and that requires aldosterone blocking, so that can be utilized. Mainly it is combined with other loop diuretics for treatment of heart failure. It can be also utilized in a resistant hypertension. Main drug of choice in case of edema due to liver cirrhosis, where there is a secondary hyperaldosteronism. It can be also utilized in primary hyperaldosteronism. So these are some of the indications of potassium sparing diuretics. So as a hypertensive drugs in edema, particularly where nephrotic and cirrhosis and refractory variety, there is a volume overload, and particularly in cirrhosis there is a secondary hyperaldosteronism, congestive heart failure, and also it can be utilized in primary hyperaldosteronism. Commonest side effect, hyperkalemia, metabolic acidosis, and because it is blocking aldosterone, it can end up with gynecomastia, which is common. Contraindication, it should not be used in a person with GERD and peptic ulcer disease, or we call acid peptic disorders. So gastritis, peptic ulcer is a main contraindication. You should keep it in mind. So if a person who has got a hyper secretions, it should be avoided. Also, it can end up with hirsutism, menstrual irregularity, gynecomastia, impotence. These are the common side effects because of aldosterone level elevation, because it blocks. In case of a primary hyperaldosteronism, it will block that aldosterone action. So it will end up with all these side effects: deepening of voice, hirsutism, menstrual irregularity, gynecomastia, impotency, etc. Other side effect because of potassium retaining hyperkalemia and metabolic acidosis. Eplerenone is mainly indicated in severe congestive heart failure when spironolactone is not much effective. Very frequently utilized in the post-infarct condition where the person has got severe LV dysfunction, and can be also utilized in person with hypertension. Osmotic diuretics, mainly mannitol, glycerol, very commonly utilized. Now also isosorbide. Isosorbide is very frequently utilized. It does not produce as much amount of electrolyte imbalance. It is acting by increasing the osmolality of plasma, and by which it will produce what we call as osmotic diuretics, and this can be easily filtered. This gets freely filtered at the level of glomerulus. So in a person with CKD, it should be used with caution. So always have a precaution if you are using osmotic diuretic, particularly mannitol or isosorbide in presence of AKI or CKD. The commonly utilized are three: mannitol, glycerol and isosorbide. The most common indication, urea, is not commonly being utilized. These are the doses which are being commonly used for having osmotic diuretic property, and it is main use is in cerebral edema, and also if carbonic anhydrous you cannot use, you can use in case of an acute glaucoma. So these are the two common indications where it is being utilized. You have to keep it in mind if any person who is in need of a hemodialysis or peritoneal dialysis, by using this osmotic diuretic you will create a problem, because person is already being decompensated kidney. So main use is ideally should not be used in the oliguric stage. Main use is in intracranial hypertension, cerebral edema before brain surgery, and in case of a glaucoma. Good number of time it is utilized as osmotic diuretic in barbiturate poisoning and counteract plasma osmolality after dialysis. Common side effects: thrombophlebitis in presence of what we call as AKI CKD. You can end up with pulmonary edema. Because it is having high osmotic property, thrombophlebitis is common. It can also produce convulsions, pulmonary edema, and person can end up with a high mortality. Headache may be due to hyponatremia, and if overdose, it can produce dehydration and can end up with hyponatremia. So always keep it in mind that mannitol should be utilized with caution. So contraindication: AKI CKD, acute tubular necrosis, anuria, etc. are contraindicated. Also, if the person has got a left ventricular failure and pulmonary edema, should not be used. Even in volume overload conditions, should not be used. In cerebral hemorrhage also should be avoided. In refractory edema, what is most important is salt restriction, avoid NaCID, multiple doses. Metalazone is commonly preferred, spironolactone is preferred, and usually combination of diuretics, that is furosemide with spironolactone or thiazide with spironolactone, etc., or you use metalazone, etc. The common side effects: potassium imbalance will be much more common with loop diuretics. This is loop diuretics. Uric acid imbalance, ototoxicity will be more common with we call as class 3 groups of diuretics, that is Lasix and torsemide, or furosemide and torsemide. Hydrochlorothiazide will produce hyperuricemia, hyperglycemia, hyperlipidemia, and electrolyte imbalance will be common in all, mainly hyponatremia, potassium imbalance. In aldosterone antagonist, it will produce potassium retention, etc. All this should be kept in your mind. Phytodiuretics is not commonly utilized. These are present in some of the natural materials. This will be more useful to what we call as Ayurvedic and homeopathy sites. It is present in couch grass, cherry, haricot, parsley, maize, corn, etc. So there are some property of this producing diuretic effects. So I end my lecture here. This is mainly for educative purpose. I thank you all for taking out time. I know that your time is valuable and I appreciate for that. I appreciate you spending some of that time with me. I hope this will be helpful to you because diuretic is very commonly utilized in everyday practice. So do keep it in mind. So I end my lecture here. See you in next lecture.